Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of JCI Cranbrook, we'd really like to thank you all for attending the All Candidates Forum this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on today is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Kootenay Nation's people. JCI is proud to host this federal election All Candidates Forum. And for those that don't know JCI, they've been holding All Candidates Forum in our community for quite a number of years, and I'm going to say almost decades. JCI Kootenay is a nonpartisan membership-based nonprofit organization comprised of members from 18 to 40 who live and work in the East Kootenays. Their members believe in the importance of creating positive change within our communities and the world. Some of their notable projects that they are and still involved with is, of course, our beloved Santa Claus Parade, the bike swap, and the playground up at Moyer Soccer Fields. So for more information, they can also visit their website, jcikootenay.com, especially if you're in the ages of between 18 and 40. They're always looking for new members. We'd also like to thank Artistic Media Productions for providing a live stream and recording of tonight's forum. We know that it's not possible for everyone to come out on a particular evening, so that it will be televised and broadcast again up until the election. We'll only be able to get through a small portion of the questions that have been submitted. They have all been vetted to remove bias and ensure they are appropriate for tonight's forum. We have very simple rules on this forum. We are asking that you please remain quiet and be respectful when there are speakers. Please wait until after the person is done talking to applaud. And please, no negative connotations, no hecklers. And I know I'm not going to expect that from this crowd at all. We want this to be a really nice forum. I had the opportunity to meet our candidates earlier tonight and over lunch, and the one thing I saw between all of them, although they have different political interests, they're all about sense of community, and they're all very, very cordial with each other, and I expect that that will carry on through the evening tonight. For the timekeeping, we have Chance, one of our members, doing the times. So candidate, when there's a green light, you still have time left to speak. Please watch for the amber light. When the amber light comes on, you'll have 20 seconds left to speak. When the red light comes on, that will be at the end of your allotted time. If you go more than 5 seconds past the red, I will be forced to cut you off as politely as I can. And we all know how polite I am. Any disputes on timing can be contested. I ask that they come up to me for any contesting, and if I can't resolve it, then we will go to our timekeeper for the official time count. Okay. So with that, I'd also like to extend a thank you to all of our candidates. I know it has been very busy for all of you traveling through the riding, and we have a big geographic riding there. So I'd just like to say a hats off, and how about a big applause for all 5 of our candidates. We decided in our pre-meeting to seat the candidates by alphabetical order, and they will start with their introductions also in that order. So you candidates will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with the person on my left as the candidates are seated, and please remember after the red light comes on, you'll only have maximum 5 seconds. So this time I'd like to now call upon Reggie Goldsbury to make his introduction.
I have been waiting and fighting to be here on this stage tonight since I was 5 years old, and I'm really thankful that all of you get to be part of this tonight. Houston, we have a problem. Donald Trump. We are in a triple crisis right now. Economic crisis, tariffs threaten us, and we have threats of annexation and actions that are going to be severe. I'm worried, you're worried. Housing crisis. Where are all the affordable homes? Why can't I afford one or rent one for an affordable price? Affordability crisis. We have seniors on fixed incomes, families that are struggling, communities within our communities. We need to find the root causes of these problems and bring them out. How that happens is talking to you. Solution. Mark Carney. Mark Carney, an experienced economist with crisis management, like the 2008 recession, the largest recession of the modern era, and Brexit, and a lot of other work internationally, forging relationships with the United Nations, within European Union, and Asia. We need Mark Carney to come and be a strong negotiator against Donald Trump. We do not need a career politician like Pierre Poilievre, and thankfully Justin Trudeau stepped down because Mark Carney knows how to fix our economy. My name is Reggie Goldsbury. I, for the last 12 years, have managed a rural economic business out on Kootenay Lake. I have led at the college level, and I currently work with the strongest teams in Cranbrook, helping the vulnerable populations with direct social investment. Also managed at the 2010 Olympics. This election, vote splitting is a big reality. The inevitability of the wave that we have. Liberals are polling at 28% this morning from 338canada.ca. And rising. The NDP are at 13% and dropping. I am reaching out to our NDP friends, Green Party friends, independents, and people who don't know who yet to vote for to understand that we need to stand up and get Mark Carney into government because we don't need a career politician. What we need is strong leadership. We are going to be bringing down interprovincial barriers. We are going to be making it where labor can be spread all across Canada and make it where a lot of these challenges that we have with healthcare, housing, affordability are addressed. Mark Carney Liberals are not Trudeau Liberals. And I find a great way that people can come together is through song. So I encourage you all to sing along because we're all so proud of our country. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see the rise of the true North, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. I love Canada. You love Canada. It is important we get Mark Carney elected. Vote Reggie Goldsbury. VoteReggie.ca.
Thank you, Reggie. I couldn't possibly cut you off on that red light warning during the national anthem. Now I'd like to introduce Kaylee Lind from the NDP party.
Hi, folks. Thank you all for being here. It's great to be here on traditional Ktunaxa territory and great to be here at the Key City Theatre. I used to perform in dance competitions on this very stage, so it's a pleasure to be back. And as a dance and theater kid, I know that you never disrespect the directions of the tech leader, so I will not get up from my seat. So, yay, theater kids. I grew up in the Kootenays, in Castlegar, in a working-class household, so I know how critical it is to have representatives from our communities making decisions in Ottawa. This is a critical time for our communities. Our industries are threatened by American tariffs. We're facing challenges to the sovereignty of our river systems. We're experiencing unprecedented changes to our natural environment every year. And yet, we are still struggling to afford our bills every month, the cost of groceries, our rent, and our mortgages. But I know that when we have strong NDP MPs tackling these issues, we get results. I was so proud to hear from a man in this area. He's 86. He had really great dental coverage when he was a unionized worker, but he wasn't able to afford to keep his premiums up after he retired. He reached out to me to express his gratitude for being able to receive an emergency root canal. And while that was happening, the dentist discovered an infection. It was in his gum and it was so close to getting into the root of his teeth. These are the kinds of programs that matter to Canadians and keep money in our pockets, keep us healthier, and make sure that we can live full lives it is really critical that we continue to send NDP MPs to Ottawa to hold government accountable to keep these programs expanding. Throughout my career in the nonprofit sector, I've advocated for practical changes to public policy that help our community organizations do their work more effectively. As an executive director myself, I have the privilege of distributing more than $500,000 annually to communities all across the Columbia Basin. I'm in this race because we need MPs who are committed to long-term thinking, collaboration, and distinctly Kootenay-based solutions to the challenges our communities face. This is not a time to shrink our ambitions for what our country can look like. We need new Democrats in Ottawa fighting every day for solutions that matter to workers and everyday Canadians. And we need MPs committed to listening and to standing by the needs of their constituents, no matter what is dominating the national agenda or what the party line is. I'm committed to being your voice in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Kaylee. We'll now hear from Stephen Mafioli of the Green Party.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Mafioli. I was born and raised in Fernie. I went to middle school here at Laurie. I am a manager at the local Save-On and a part-time yoga instructor. I have been with the Green Party for 10 years, working in many different campaigns across Alberta. I've been talking to Canadians about voter reform that whole time. I really want to emphasize today that you're going to hear a lot of things from all these people on the stage promising a lot of different things. But there's only two of us on the stage that are not subject to party whipping, and I think that is so important. You need an MP who is not going to be under someone else's thumb. You need an MP who's going to listen directly to you and what you need. I'm happy to be that MP, and I am happy to represent the Green Party. There's a lot of things that the Green Party represents besides environmentalism. We are very much for universal pharmacare, voter reform, and universal dental, UBI. I could go on and on about what we represent, but ultimately what we represent is building stronger communities across Canada and looking out for the interests of Canadians. That is all.
Thank you, Stephen. And Rob Morrison from the Conservative Party.
Good evening. Rob Morrison, Conservative Party, and I just want to say I was honored to be your Member of Parliament for the last 6 years. I just want to explain a couple of roles that I have as a Member of Parliament. First of all, when I'm in the riding, which I'm out of the riding about 130 days a year in Ottawa, but when I'm in, I'm your federal representative, and I have been representing about 8,000 people since in the last 6 years. And I help out with things like OAS, CPP, passports that are expired or lost, immigration, temporary foreign workers, seasonal agricultural workers, PAL, RPALs, and CRA. And just to give you an example, we had a single parent, a woman who came into our office and said that she hasn't had her child tax credit for 6 years, and CRA lost her file. So after about a month and a half, researched that and finally had CRA find a file, and she received over $30,000. And that's just one of many, instances where we've helped people. And I'm sure there's people here tonight that have been in our office that we have helped. And we have an open door. Once we're through the election, it's all nonpartisan. And anybody who's been in a role of federal government knows that. And that's how we are in our office. The second thing that I do is I'm the official opposition. So it's my job to hold government to account. I don't pass bills. I don't spend money, because that's all done by the government, and that has been the Liberal government for the last 10 years. 10 years of the Liberal government. And remember the transparency and accountability that they said that this is going to be the government. Well, I can tell you, we have had more scandals, more ethic violations in government history, more spending, high inflation. 10 years. But we're lucky because we now have an opportunity to change direction. They've had 10 years to build homes, not happening. It's time for a new government. Rural versus urban, we've really had some challenges with that, where it seems as though because we're rural, we're sort of left behind, and all the finances for everything, for infrastructure is going to the urban centers. And it's time that we had a leader who understands urban, what our realities are with urban, but also the differences with rural and how we are different people here. We We need to drive our trucks. We need to, to drive 120, 40, 100, 200 kilometers for medical care. That's just how we are. And East versus West, we just need to be unified. And I assure you that I'll continue to serve everyone in our riding and make life more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And Jim Wiedrick, Independent.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm a husband, a father of 4, and an emergency room doctor in Nelson. And if you haven't met me, my name's Jim Wiedrick. I'm honored to be part of this campaign and this process. And my basic point is that there has to be a new way of framing our politics. Now, I've thought about and seen politics from all kinds of angles. When I was a kid, I had a real wild-eyed enthusiasm for getting on a rented candidate bus off to a party nomination, because even then I knew that politics was how we made decisions in this country, how things got decided. And then in my middle adult years, say between the ages of 20 and 50, I became a practicing physician, ran a group medical practice in Alberta. I've subsequently spent many time in small stints in Northwest Territories, Africa, and throughout British Columbia. And for the last 11 years, my family has called Nelson, BC home. In the last 5 to 7 years, though, the other angle that I've seen with politics is that really actually it's ultimately distorted in how we're doing it in this country. And it boils down to the fact that at the end of the day, there's only 2 or 3 party leaders' opinions who are ever allowed to matter. Everyone else is forced by the way they're all engaging the practice of the trade to work in lockstep with those opinions. And if they don't agree, boom, out they're gone. And that's why I'm running as an independent, because I'm like, that's not okay. That's squashing people's voices. That's suppressing the actual needs of individual citizens. And the whole point of having a representative democracy is so that you can actually have your point of view transmitted up to Ottawa. I stand firmly in the knowledge that if we just buy into this narrative that the heroes of the story are the party leaders. You could name the 2 or 3 leaders I'm thinking about, and they're carrying on and, we should follow their exciting adventures. Whoa, stop. The heroes, everyone in this auditorium, all your other friends and neighbors who are out there doing the work and keeping this country running. And I'm signing up and volunteering to say, hey, choose me as your representative. I want to be your listener, your guide, your fighter, the person who is going to fight for effective electoral reform, affordability, environmental stewardship, abolishing our trade barriers, and healthcare accessibility. And I look forward to talking about that more tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Excellent job, and well within time. Excellent. So we actually have some pre-submitted questions, and I'm hoping our audience has submitted some questions in the lobby area prior. We're going to be vetting through those. The program tonight is we're going to go through a series of pre-submitted questions. Each candidate is going to be asked the same question. They will have 2 minutes to respond. So I remind our candidates again, when the amber light comes on, it's 20 seconds. And once the red light comes on, you will be cut off after 5 seconds. Okay? And we'd also like to thank our Cranbrook Chamber of Commerce who did some of our pre-written questions here tonight as our JCI groups goes through all the questions that we received tonight from the audience. So the first question will go to Reggie, and we will then alternate, but again going down the same line. What of our most critical issues is Canada's water sovereignty? Serving our Canadian natural resources is paramount for our future. With the Columbia River Treaty negotiations now on hold, what can you bring to Ottawa to bring awareness to this important federal issue? And what would you propose to Ottawa to ensure protection of our sovereign water? Reggie?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to everyone who's made this event come together and to the audience for coming out tonight. The Columbia River Treaty has been suspended under Donald Trump, and it is a central way of our life. Our whole riding is within the basin, but the terms of the treaty have shortchanged British Columbia for decades. We need local leadership to fight for a fairer deal. We need fair revenue sharing, a push for more compensation for BC and reinvestment of that revenue in local communities, especially in the Kootenays. We need a local voice at the table to ensure that Indigenous and regional leaders are included in future treaty negotiations and to make sure the deal benefits all who live upon the river. We need environmental protections, advocate for stronger fish habitats, ecosystem restoration, and watershed health and treaty discussions. Climate resilient investments, prioritizing flood protection, infrastructure and improved water management to protect communities from future climate impacts, and transparency and accountability. It is so nice to be with Mark Carney and being told to find out on the front lines of the discussions that are happening and bringing them to him in Ottawa. We need to ensure that our communities are informed throughout the treaty negotiation process and their voices are heard. This treaty has been suspended, and we need strong leadership to bring it back to the table. We need to make sure that we're standing up for our interests and making sure we have a voice at the governing table. If we have a Liberal government, which as polling is showing, we need a person with the power brokers around the governing table. If you elect Reggie Goldsbury, myself, I will stand shoulder to shoulder with Mark Carney to make sure we bring the Columbia River Treaty to the forefront of these discussions.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee, would you like me to repeat the question, or you good?
I think I'm okay.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for this question. It is something that I'm having a lot of conversations with folks about. Of course, the initial treaty was predominantly focused on American flood mitigation and power generation. It is time that the new treaty has a much broader view and particularly takes into account ecosystem restoration, and doing so with the leadership and full participation of all Indigenous groups in the region. One of the big concerns that people have around these treaty negotiations in the context of our broader trade war with the U.S. is the concern that our control over water levels as Canadians could be used as a bargaining chip, potentially to bail out the auto industry or to bail out other industries elsewhere in Canada that do not directly benefit those of us in this region. I unequivocally will stand up in support of our local control of water levels. In current drafts of the document, I'm pleased to see that the negotiating teams have worked out Canadian control for 30% of the reservoir, which is significant. That is a huge step in the right direction. Right now, our major task is defending the gains that have already been made in the draft of the new treaty, continuing to advance conversations about compensation for Canada, for our communities and for Indigenous nations in the area as well, and to stand firm on those negotiations as they've been proceeding, and to get people back to the table as well. Thankfully, no party can step out of the treaty without a 10-year lead time. There's currently a provisional treaty in place that is functioning well. So it is a scary time on matters of those treaty negotiations, but I'm grateful that there are provisions there that allow us to take a long-term view, and I hope saner minds will prevail over the long term.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen, did you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. With the Columbia River Treaty negotiations now on hold, what can you bring to Ottawa to bring awareness to this important federal issue, and what would you propose to Ottawa to ensure protection of our sovereign water?
My party is very similar to the NDP and Liberals. I agree with everything that Reggie and Kaylee have said today. They're very intelligent and they make very valid points. One thing that my party will bring to the table, much like theirs, is a more Indigenous-led effort on that. We need to make sure that their interests are protected first and foremost. We are not as close to the United States as we used to be, and that's unfortunate, and we need to obviously protect our own interests, and that includes our water. Unfortunately, everything that they've said, my party also supports. and a good idea is a good idea, right? Yep.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob?
Thank you. Fortunately, I've been dealing with the Columbia River Treaty for the last 6 years, and it's been going on long before that. I think what we need to do is one thing that hasn't been done, and that's having a representative from, like your member of parliament for this area, as an observer to follow through with what the negotiating team is doing. Because I know there's a group here that I've talked with many times about water levels at Kootenay, and that never came up in that draft, at least what I saw of it, and I tried to see the whole draft. So I don't know if we need to do some adjusting in seeing that the local people in the area who are affected, are their concerns being heard? Because I didn't see that. And this is such an important treaty. There is so much money in this, billions of dollars in revenue from the hydro, and the levels, like the level of the lake at Kootenay is vital, whether there's a weir in there or whether we should be able to get the levels by just an agreement rather than having to weir. Weir is kind of like a dam, but no dam, just a water level. And I just find that sometimes with these negotiations, when you let bureaucrats handle it all, sometimes things just are missed. And I think it's important to have a bit of oversight. And that's what I would do going to Ottawa, is ensuring that whoever the representative is for this area, that they are in fact part of being an observer, not to negotiate. That's not their role. And this is actually federal, but it's been handed over to the province, because waterways are federal, but it's handed to the province, who are doing the best they can in negotiating. I agree with that. And there's it's complex. There's, the eco challenges and that have, over the years, that have been forgotten. But still, I just think we could do so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Jim, would you like me to repeat the question? You're good? Thank you.
I'm going to pause and just boil this down to the essence of it. What is more near and dear to us than our water sovereignty? Nothing comes to my mind. So if your gut says, okay, this really matters, and then you say, well, why are we in a continuance? Well, we're in a continuance because we not really had a respectful negotiation from our friends to the south. Okay. Then if you know that there's kind of a chaos agent doing his thing down south and influencing, even if it's just indirectly, but influencing how this is all going, then as part of a Trump protection plan, you've got to say, okay, well, we're not negotiating if you're not coming respectfully, if you're not showing us respect. The whole point of having this treaty in the first place was this mutual flood control and electricity generation. Okay, fair enough. So how do we strengthen our hand in the meantime while we have a continuance? The first thing we have to acknowledge is that right now we actually still rely on the United States for some of our electricity different times of the year, and we can talk about how the grid flows things back and forth. Well, it's nice to have, except they're no longer showing us that they're a dependable partner. So, the common sense pragmatic approach from my point of view goes, all right, then let's make sure we have enough electricity. And it's where I start talking about things like nuclear generated electricity, make sure that we hurry up and have the infrastructure. We have what we need, and if they're not going to play ball, then we just say, okay, we'll wait.
Thank you. We're going to start with Kaylee for our next question. Given the rising,
The suspense.
I brought these for a reason. Given the rising criminal activity in our business community, what is your or yours party's stance on amending the Criminal Code of Canada to impose stricter sentencing for drug trafficking and repeat violent offenders? So I'll read that one more time. Given the rising criminal activity in our business community, what is your or your party's stance on amending the Criminal Code of Canada to impose stricter sentencing for drug trafficking and repeat violent offenders? Kaylee?
I'm not opposed to amending the Criminal Code of Canada to impose harsher sentencing on drug traffickers and repeat offenders. I like that approach because it focuses on criminalizing criminal activity and not criminalizing drug users. That needs to be part and parcel of a much broader crisis response in which we are ensuring that there's strong wraparound services in our communities to ensure that those who are experiencing addiction are able to find centralized supports, are able to find support navigating through structures that are available to help them to find housing, to find employment. What I'm seeing so often in communities is that supports are receiving very short-term funding, a year, 2 years, they disappear, and then people experiencing addiction issues are scattered throughout communities, they're dispersed. It's harder for law enforcement and those social service agencies to serve them. It's harder for them to keep an eye on those communities, and then of course the unfortunate indirect results end up in front of businesses, in front of homes. So absolutely, that is one tool that I'm in favor of, amending the criminal code to address repeat offenders in drug trafficking. But that needs to be in tandem of stronger wrap-around supports. As well, I recognize that our police forces have been strapped for resources, they're short-staffed. Right now, we have a formula where 90% of funding for the RCMP is coming from municipalities, and a lot of municipalities simply don't have the tax base to shoulder that whole cost. I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And again, the more that we can be proactive in providing services to community members who are experiencing addiction, the more the pressures can be taken off the RCMP and law enforcement as well. I think that's a very healthy balance.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was very well spoken. Thank you. I agree with a lot of what she said. It was very common sense, as some members would say. And I also would support, changing the criminal code to create harsher punishments for drug dealers and stuff like that and repeat offenders. I think everybody on this stage wants to protect Canadian communities and our own families. What we're seeing in our town, in my town of Fernie, is addiction is flourishing and people are not thriving. That's coupled with an affordability crisis too. People are feeling destitute. They need a way out. When we don't have a way out, we start falling. And I would very much support what the Conservative leader has actually proposed too, which was a rapid investment in rehabilitation and even potentially forced rehabilitation for those who desperately need it. I'm very hesitant on supporting longer sentences for non-violent offenders, but when you are someone who is pushing drugs in our community, you are inadvertently a violent offender because you are ruining lives. I would very much support increasing the sentences and changing the criminal code on that.
Thank you, Steve. Rob, go ahead.
Can I get 10 minutes for this one?
No, you cannot.
It's interesting. Like Cranbrook families, you see it here all the time. You see the more theft, open drug use, longer wait times for call for help. Small town neglect. This is a problem in a lot of our small communities, whether it's Cranbrook or Nelson or Trail, and we need to reverse the soft on crime approach. The C5 bail, not jail, C75 removing some mandatory sentences, but there also is another touch in that. I really support the fact that we can help some of these people rather than putting them in jail, or rather than just the catch and release, which is 70-some convictions and they're on the street still, and that's having the beds for detox rehab. I mean, that has to be. If anybody in here who's had family that has been involved with addictions, and I know I have, and I know people here who have, and it's hard. I mean, it just destroys your family with the addiction. So, yeah, I agree, we don't need to put everybody in jail. I mean, I did that for a living, but I do agree that in, first offense, second offense, we've got to kind of see what the problem is and not just start incarcerating people for longer sentences, but definitely I believe with forced rehab. If somebody's committed 70, 80 crimes, instead of going 2 years to a penitentiary with gangbangers and organized crime, go to a facility that deals with addiction. So after your 2 years is up, you come out and you can contribute to your community again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I want to emphasize how absolutely vital it is that a campaign like this is when we actually make collective decisions as a society about how we're going to approach this. So listen, I'm an emergency room doctor. I mean, meth is a scourge. People coming in with psychotic episodes after taking meth is way more challenging than all of the other aspects of the drug trade right now. But I say that not to try to create some kind of scale of difficulty, but to acknowledge that there are a ton of problems. They occupy the police's time. They occupy our emergency room time. It's all getting in the way of the accessibility for all of the everyday needs and the other things that the system has to deliver, whether that's our police or our health services. So to the extent that I think there's a specific role for doing more criminalizing in a drug space, I'm not sure that that's actually worked big picture long term. But absolutely, do we have to pour into things like street outreach, keeping violent offenders locked up once you've reached that threshold where it's 3 times and you clearly aren't getting the picture? Fair enough. But we have to acknowledge that things like the whole safe supply thing was a total misdirection. Handing out medications that addicts didn't even want because it didn't work for their fix in the first place, so that we could give them a currency so that then they could make sure that younger folks in our community got more and more. I mean, it's those kind of things that have to be ancient history, and we don't want to go back in those directions anymore. Let's get a common sense approach going forward.
Thank you, Jim. And last is Reggie.
This is a very personal issue for me. I worked with a gentleman 2 years ago, worked with him for 5 years, and he had a drug overdose and died. And I found him, and it was very traumatizing. He is not a criminal. He is not a bad person. And we need to remember that these are people within our communities. They come with mental health issues, addiction issues. They can't afford housing or affordability in general. But we cannot lose hope that these are people within our communities that need help. That's part of the reason why I moved back to Cranbrook to work in the social investment sector, because I wanted the work that I'm doing to be meaningful. And as a member of parliament, the meaningful work that I can do around this issue particularly is addressing policing and rural crime. Places in like Cranbrook, we felt overlooked on public safety, and here's a few ideas that we can directly do rather than talking here and having ideals. We need action. Actions we have is we are recruiting 1,000 new RCMP officers. We need to lobby for them to come to our areas and fill the positions, and how we do that is through incentives, bringing them directly here to Cranbrook and within our riding. We need to ensure BC receives its fair share and that long response times shouldn't be the norm. We can address this through incentives and different actions by working with our provincial and community and regional counterparts. Local crime prevention programs, we need to expand the community patrols, youth outreach, and programs addressing the root causes of property crime. We don't need to be fear-mongering and say that these people are bad. These people are our friends, and they are our community members. I'm very sad that some people take the perspective that just because they are unhoused or have had challenges in their lives, many of us cannot walk in their shoes and understand where they are. We need support. Safe supply, that's a question that we can talk about and bring your discussions to the table. But there are things in there that have saved people's lives. We have ways to make it where harm reduction is important as well.
Thank you. We have a person for that.
An applause for the text.
I'm a little worrisome that there's a pair of scissors on the table with the candidates. But again, as I said earlier, they're being very cordial, and it's really nice, very nice to see even the the fellowship that goes on. They actually were offering to help pick up each other's signs that were like fallen over or things like that. So, okay. Our next question, and we're going to have Stephen start off with this one. Under the Canada Health Act, how will you or your party ensure reasonable access to health care, and how can we improve immigration accreditation policies and advocacy for foreign-trained professionals to choose Cranbrook? I'm going to repeat it one more time. Under the Canada Health Act, how will you or your party ensure reasonable access to health care, and how can we improve immigration accreditation policies and advocacy for foreign-trained professionals to choose Cranbrook?
Well, our healthcare system is in shambles. Let's be honest with ourselves here. We need proper infrastructure and we need proper access to our healthcare. I have volunteers who are in Creston, Nelson, and Trail, and they end up going to Kelowna or Calgary or wherever they need to go for their healthcare. My party would love to push for other alternatives, but there needs to be more done, and it can only be achieved with collaboration. I would like to see holistic practitioners come into the mix as well in our healthcare system to take some load off of our physicians and our pharmacists. That's all I really have to say is I would like to just add more holistic practitioners to our healthcare and increase our transit and infrastructure to get to our healthcare destinations.
Thank you, Steve. Rob?
Yeah, thank you. And we all know what it's like to try and get a family doctor here. It's you have to get one from another province, I think. I know we have a huge shortage here, and one thing that 1 in 5 Canadians live in a rural area, and we have 8% of the physicians practice there. That's the disconnect. We've looked at how do we cut the red tape from having doctors that are qualified working in, for example, in Eastern Canada or Alberta, and they can't come and work in British Columbia because, you have to write another test, or you've got to get a different document. It's like we need to start, moving that red tape, not only for our doctors that live and work in Canada, but also international doctors that come from reputable, and we know where they are, the reputable universities, and they can work with the surgeon if they are and see what their skill level is like. We really need to also look at how do we entice people to come to Cranbrook. And I mean, once you live here, you absolutely love it. We have recreation here and ski hills. We have so much to offer, but we've just got to get them here and get their families started so that they want to stay and work here. It is very challenging, but we just need to put way more money into it. We have a seniors population that has to travel for 4, 5, 6 hours to Kelowna. We can't even get to Alberta from here. Like that's, how's that possible? And I just think we just need to sit down. Federal government needs to work with the province, because it is provincial, work with the province and start looking at new ways of how we can get our doctor, nurses, lab techs, everyone else who we need in our hospitals here for us in the rural areas. Thank you.
Well, you can tell about what someone cares about by what they spend their time on or maybe their money on, but I have a 14-episode YouTube podcast called Transforming Healthcare in Southeast BC, and if you're interested in a longer answer than I'm about to give, I'd be happy for you to check that out afterwards, because here's the thing. We have this Canada Health Act. It's an overriding piece of legislation in our country that gives the umbrella for our care, but it's from 1984. We don't practice medicine like it's 1984 anymore. And so these 5 pillars of the Canada Health Act, publicly administered, universal, comprehensive, accessible, portable, they're fine. But we have to add timely as a pillar, because being on a waiting list is not getting health care. And we have to have patient-focused as one of the pillars. And what that means is the dollars follow the patient. There are jurisdictions in this country that are moving towards that, and I absolutely think we should be too. So it's the feds that can have that kind of overarch and then guide the provinces toward it. The feds can use some of their Canada Health Transfer and designate it for such things as medical imaging, having CTs in communities in more places. There's no reason why Cranbrook should be the only community in the East Kootenay that has a CT, and everyone from Fernie to Creston to Invermere has to come here. And I'll go further. You know, there are totally mechanisms for breaking down interprovincial trade barriers. And by that I mean we should have national licensure for physicians and all the other associated medical professions. Our College of Physicians and Surgeons in BC is notorious for being very sticky. The hardest province to kind of get licensing in. Well, if there are U.S. professionals who are interested in moving here in the next months and years to come, then the college has to be broken down. We can have mutual recognition, we can have national licensure for all these things, and it takes a little bit of federal will, but man, would I want to be one of those voices advocating for that.
Thank you, Jim. And down to them. We'll hear from Reggie. One microphone. We sterilize it each time.
As a fourth-generation Kootenay resident, I have witnessed firsthand the challenges our rural communities face in healthcare. Our emergency rooms are stretched thin, clinics are closing, doctors are retiring, and families are waiting years to get a family doctor. I now work with a team dedicated to securing social and healthcare investments that we urgently need. I think we need a plan. More than just sitting down, we need action. And where those actions are is we're going to train and place more doctors in rural Canada. We're going to introduce 1,000 new family medicine residencies and fast-track the integration of foreign-trained doctors already here in Canada. For rural and remote incentive programs, we can look to the leadership within Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island, where their building, administration staff, and support staff are being paid for by the government so the doctors can focus on being doctors and not having to be entrepreneurs. We need to make it where their focus can be on their craft and not dealing with business. The federal government can work with our provincial counterparts and address this head on. We need to offer enhanced compensation, support, and career development opportunities to retain the doctors. How we do this is with incentives, have tax write-offs, pay for their homes. We need team-based care models where we establish collaborative clinics integrating doctors, nurses, mental health professionals, and Indigenous healthcare providers. This approach reduces individual workload and improves patient access. We need accountable health transfers. We need to ensure the federal government funding is tied to measurable outcomes. We have had lots of funding and increasing in funding over the years. Why isn't our service getting better? We're going to look at the root causes of this and increase access to doctors in our rural areas. I will fight to ensure rural communities are never an afterthought, and because healthcare shouldn't depend on where your postal code is.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
I'm really proud of some of the announcements that have come out of the NDP, specifically to address this issue during the campaign. Notably, we've committed to a 1% increase in transfer payments to provinces, and tying that specifically to the hiring and retention of doctors and prioritizing rural communities within those measures. 6.5 million Canadians are still waiting for a family doctor, and I'm one of them. It's going on 3 years now since I moved to Nelson, and the problem is only getting worse as we have more and more retirements. It's not a secret why we're in this problem. The Harper government cut $43.5 billion out of healthcare transfers to provinces. This isn't an issue that arose overnight. This has come from the chipping away at our healthcare system, and it's going to take a lot of multifaceted approach to get us back to the point where everyone has a reliable primary care provider. We have some really great success stories here in the region. Selkirk College has a rural pre-med program. I would love to see, and I would advocate for greater support for that program and others in the region. We know that those graduates go on to pharmaceuticals, they go into surgery, they go to medical school, they go all throughout the healthcare professions, and those are largely people from the area that are helping to solve this problem right here at home. There's also been some announcements just today, actually, coming out of the NDP, specifically committed to supporting nursing in the region. We know that the more we can provide a range of supports to patients, the more that we can free up physicians to do their work, and the better care will be. We've committed to supporting provinces in the hiring of 35,000 new nurses, specifically paying them while they do their practicums and their training as well to reduce barriers to practicing in those fields. As well, we're committed to ensuring that nurses are eligible for the $5,000 Canadian healthcare worker tax credit.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Oh, the lights, sorry.
Thank you. So those were, so the Cranbrook Chamber of Commerce had submitted 6 pre-submit questions. We were allowed to select 3 of them. But now, because to reward our audience, we want to go to your questions. The timing changes now for these audience questions, and I have a few in front of me. We will be taking a short break, but we're actually ahead of schedule, which is nice because that means we're going to get more of your questions in. We are going to take a break at about 7:45 just because they've been under the hot lights for over an hour. Hot lights or hot seats. But now we're going to move into the audience questions, and each candidate can choose to respond, and again, it will be in the order. And they've been written to be generalized so each candidate can comment. Now, for timing, you will have 1 minute to answer. 1 minute to answer. Your green light, keep speaking. Amber, 20 seconds. Red, 5 seconds, and we end. Okay. This question will start off with Rob now. Given the many promises made by the parties, would each candidate share what their party is forecasting for the deficit over the next 4 years? Given the many promises made by the parties, would each candidate share what their party is forecasting for the deficit over the next 4 years? Rob?
Yep, well, it's really, I guess, part of what we have in our area here. We have the mining. So we have our Fording River expansion. We will prove that within 1 year. We'll get that going. That's about 2,000 jobs. We also have their smelter in Trail. We'll get more minerals for them to do the critical minerals that they work on. We'll work with our forestry industry, which has been left alone, and they had tariffs long before the word tariff came up. And there's just so much we can do with ourselves with the lumber there, and also with the energy sector. We'll do a pipeline east-west. We'll get people working. We'll sell our natural gas. We just lost $1 trillion deal to Japan because we couldn't get our act together. And we're going to get people working. Getting people working will be tax dollars. After the tax dollars, that goes into pay the deficit. We can pay our debts. People will be happy because they'll be working and providing for their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
So I'm just going to make sure that I understood that the question was, what do I think the projected deficit will be in the next year?
That would be correct.
Right. Okay, so then here's my take. I don't know because Parliament doesn't work, because the Liberals and the Conservatives play games. And whether there's 3 months of we can't have committees and we don't actually have a functioning Parliament last fall, or whether there's a 3-month prorogation where we issue standing orders so that we can kind of fund the government. But I don't know, I listened to that economic statement that Ms. Freeland wasn't allowed to come and broadcast. It was going to be $60 billion. Well, our federal government has had its civil service grow by 40% over the last 10 years. We don't need that many workers. I haven't seen 40% improved services or new things that they're doing. I mean, spending matters. It really matters, but it's an unanswerable question because we've allowed the parties to gamify Parliament so much that nobody in this room knows the answer to the question.
Thank you. Over to Reggie. And again, would you like me to repeat the question?
No.
No, you're good. Thank you. Okay.
1 minute is definitely not enough time for these questions, and I'd encourage definitely more. I understand that the trust in government is low, particularly in rural communities, and that's something we need to address right on. We have large government debt, and Mark Carney is an economist who's going to come in and relook at what we're doing in our economy. We are going to grow the pie. We're going to cut waste and modernize spending, implement performance-based budgeting, ensuring every dollar spent delivers value towards Canadians. We're going to open data and accountability. push for digital transparency that shows taxpayers exactly where their money is going. And I have a portal idea that we will bring to this riding where every person will know what entitlements they have and what challenges they have with granting process. Frequently asked questions. You should not need a social worker to help you navigate the government. We are going to centralize that, and the Member of Parliament should be addressing that. We're going to have rural proofing funding to ensure the federal programs aren't just focused on big cities, but take into account the unique challenges that we need.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
I want to be really specific with this. The Liberals and Conservatives have both promised to balance the budget. That means $34 billion in cuts to the services that you depend on. These are things like cuts to dental care, cuts to pharmacare, cuts to education, cuts to transit, cuts to infrastructure, cuts to healthcare transfer payments. I will not commit to balancing the budget. The NDP will not commit to balancing the budget at this very unstable time. There are 2 million jobs in Canada that depend on trade with the US. We simply cannot be taking risks with our economy. We need to be expanding AI, and we need to be ensuring that supports that workers need right now are on the table and available.
Thank you. And the microphone to Stephen.
The good doctor phrased it very well. Who does know what we're going to be facing next year for the deficit? I sure don't. I haven't been in government, and this Liberal government has, frankly, just run up the bill so high that it's not plausible that we can get out of it anymore. I really don't have a lot to say on that because I cannot predict the future, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next question, fitting that it's going to the doctor. What will you do to improve access to healthcare? What will you do to improve access to healthcare as our Member of Parliament?
Yep, healthcare accessibility. I'm going to focus on two parts, but again, there's a lot more. Happy for you to listen to all my different audio and podcast stuff. So here we go. A Liberal health minister about 6 years ago, Jane Philpott, has in the meantime and in between time written a really excellent book. It's called Health for All. And she drills down on primary care, saying basically that no matter your postal code or your geographic area, you've got to be able to have access to primary care. So I actually think that that has to be one of the main functions. And the second is that modern medicine, especially emergency medicine, can't be practiced well without a CT scanner. No specialist wants my referral if I can't tell them what the CT shows. We have to have it in way more communities. If that has to be a federal infrastructure program, then so be it. Those are my two biggest thoughts.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Reggie?
This is very important for sure, and you heard me speak of some of it. Rural and remote incentive programs offering enhanced compensation, support, and career development opportunities to retain doctors and nurse practitioners in rural areas is exceptionally important. Taking the entrepreneurship out of doctors and making it where they can focus on their practice. We talked about the Cowichan Valley down in the island, and that's a model that we can base off of. We need to team-based care models to make it where locally we have our teams working together in a greater fashion. And how we can do that is by recruiting people through incentives, these professionals through incentives, lowering the interprovincial trade barriers, and making it where people who come in from the United States would be able to have a streamlined approach of how to get into our system. We need to break down barriers and give the incentives so professionals will want to come into our areas. And this extends to trades and professionals of all backgrounds.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
One of the barriers that needs broken down here is resolving a backlog in our immigration system. 1 in 4 healthcare workers across Canada is an immigrant, and we have 942,000 immigration cases that are held up. The NDP is committed to clearing that backlog, to supporting pan-Canadian licensing for healthcare professionals, fast-tracking doctors from the US and from areas with equivalent credentials. I was talking to a doctor who's in the West Kootenays. He's saying, if he has a patient who goes to Alberta Alberta, if he flushes his medication, his heart medication down the toilet, he can't even write him a prescription. So we need to ease barriers for healthcare professionals practicing across borders, and that would help patient care as well.
Thank you. Stephen?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. What will you do to improve access to health care as a member of Parliament? What will you do to improve access to health care?
So we can talk about bringing in other people from other countries to become physicians, but we need to talk about educating our own kids to be physicians. What's deterring our kids from becoming nurses and doctors and stuff like that is the cost of education. Nobody wants to be a physician when you're crippled with $100,000 of debt all your life. We need to give free education to young people so that they're passionate and excited about being physicians, that they rush into it without any worry about spending the rest of their medical life paying off the debt that they acquired in their teenage years and 20s. I don't think that we need to bring in more people to solve that issue. We just need to care for Canadians first and give them the best opportunity, and that comes with giving free education for medicine and for nurses and stuff.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob?
Thank you. I think everybody here knows that 6 years ago I took on a challenge of trying to get the BC Alberta healthcare straightened out, and I got close for a while, and it just seemed that it was an error in how the funding traveled from BC to Alberta, that it never went to the cancer clinic in Calgary, for example. Those are, in my mind, those are really easy fixes. We need to work with the provinces so that we can do that. We also need to attract people. The capital gains that was put on, that's not going to attract many doctors. So we need to get that removed so that they come here, and that is their pension plan. So let's allow them to come and be able to work. Telemedicine, we talked about that, and we just need to have better rural connecting with our internet so that we can do some work there. But there's so much more we can do with just the tools that are there, but we also need to attract way more people. Now, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you to all 5 candidates for your answers. So we're going to go with the mic back to Reggie for this start. With the political climate in the United States, what will you do to ensure the rights of our minorities, such as women, trans people, other members of the LGBTQ community, and how will they be protected? I'll read it one more time. With the political climate in the United States, what will you do to ensure the rights of our minorities, such as women, trans people, other members of the LGBTQ community, will be protected?
I'm just going to stand to say the first part of this. We are going to keep Canada Canadian. However, this is an important thing because we do have a lot of culture trickling in from the United States, and a lot of that culture we do disagree with. We love the American people. We do not particularly like your hostile government. Relating to minorities, immigrants, 2S, LGBTQ plus communities, we hear that there is a lot of threats that you feel coming into Canada and having the American government threaten to take our country. We need to make sure that the U.S. rhetoric on tariffs and annexation represent a real and growing threat in our economy and sovereignty, and we cannot take a soft approach. We must stand firm in defending these interests. So to help all these communities, we're going to protect sovereignty, diversify trade, modernize our defense to defend Canada. We're going to have fair trade for Canadian workers, including our immigrants and minority.
Kaylee, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, it's all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
3 proposals. We have some excellent community organizations that are specifically focused on countering discrimination in Canada. Intercultural Kootenays is a wonderful one. They operate a racist incident hotline. You should all know about that and share it with your communities. Core support for those organizations so they can do their work to the best degree possible. Bolstering our domestic media ecosystem. We've lost 500 media outlets across Canada in the past decade, most of them in rural communities. We need to strengthen the CBC, and we need to hold online platforms accountable for the harms and the hate that is spread there. The Online Harms Act needs to be reintroduced, and we need to hold those platforms to account.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not surprising that hate is growing in Canada. We see what happens in the United States, and for some reason, some of us feel like we need to take on the practices and the ideas of American politics, and that's just not true. I'm not going to speak for everybody else on the stage, but as a bisexual person, I frankly have seen a large increase in hate over the years towards my colleagues and people like myself. And it's not just towards the LGBTQ2+ people, it's people of different diverse ethnic backgrounds and women. And what we need to do to defend ourselves from that hatred is strengthen laws against hate speech and hate groups, and fund community programs that fight discrimination. Protecting people of all walks of life and giving them the access to gender-affirming care and healthcare. Combating racist practices in policing and law enforcement is also essential to protecting marginalized groups.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob?
You know, it just surprises me that that not everyone treats everyone with respect. I'm not sure where this hatred comes from. I'm one that totally supports us doing way more enforcement as far as hate crime and hate speech, and we've seemed to have lost our way. There's a lot of hatred out there that it just seems to have bubbled up over the last few years, and I'm sure a lot of it's U.S. influence. And I think we just need to sit down and say, how are we, I don't know, we just need to do something a lot different than we are, and which should be inclusive. Everybody, shouldn't matter who you are, what you look like, what you do. Everybody should be treated equally with as much respect as I treat the people up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
A human is a human is a human. And all of us have a creator-given divine spark, and it's always got to be that way. And, you know, emergency room, everybody, all comers come. I don't get to say, well, today I'm not going to see 3-year-old kids. It doesn't work that way. You take whoever shows up, and I've worked with people from all walks of life, and when you quietly work with them and you hear some of the trauma and the stories that they've been through, it really breaks your heart. And I absolutely can't stand some of the online nuttiness that goes on. So just pause, take 3 deep breaths, and look at the human right in front of you and deal with them with the kindness you want.
Okay, a new question, and we're going to have Kaylee start. It's a longer one. Over the years, there's been a significant increase of hard drug and overdose events in the area. How do you directly wish to reduce this in the area? And do you think that there is a link between drug use, mental health, and homelessness? I'll repeat that one more time. Over the years, there has been a significant increase of hard drug and overdose events in the area. How do you directly wish to reduce this in the area? And do you think that there is a link between drug use, mental health, and homelessness? Kaylee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a timely day for this question. I spent some time today at Rotary Park. There was an event there noting the 9th anniversary of BC declaring the toxic drug crisis an emergency. 14,500 deaths have occurred since that time. These are people who are friends, neighbors, family members. There's absolutely a link to drug use and mental health issues and homelessness as well. I advocate for a housing first approach to ensure that people have a stable place from which to approach managing their addictions, moving into stable employment, and getting the support that they need.
Thank you, Kaylee. And Stephen?
I agree with a lot of what she said. Very intelligent stuff tonight. I do believe that addiction and homelessness are very intertwined. We see a lot of people who may enter poverty not addicted and become addicted. We need to make sure that people have affordable housing, that they have money in their pocket, and that they have hope that they can last in Canada. Right now, people are not thriving, we're struggling, and it makes us feel bleak. I would like to see our government actually push for more education on drug abuse and more education towards stopping the spread of illegal drugs in our country. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob?
Yeah, so addiction, homelessness, mental health, not everybody out there is addicted to opioids. There's mental health, which is really tricky. It's really hard to deal with. You need to be a psychiatrist. It's very difficult to separate, and it's not everyone isn't an addict. I still go back to, I don't agree with what they used to call that word safe supply. I don't think there's such a word as safe. Personally, I think we should be dealing with that through rehab, detox, so we can help the people if we can. Mental health, now that I have to refer to a doctor to help with that issue. But I think we can move forward. I believe we just have to do something and not just let this fester. These people want to come home. They want to come back to our homes. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Jim?
Well, in many ways, this question dovetails into the last one in my mind. Because, yes, clearly there are intricate connections and ties between all three of the things I mentioned, the substance misuse, we call it, housing instability, and the mental illness. So there is a small percentage of folks in our community who have what's called an axis 1 disorder. So I'm just going to say that might be true schizophrenia or true bipolar illness. Sometimes that sends you down tough paths. But way more than that are people who have had a trauma in their life. Now, I use that word trauma very broadly. A really tough upbringing, abuse, a horrible event. We've got to get back to that community-based human compassion to where we're actually looking after our neighbors so that we can start unraveling this big, great, tight problem.
Thank you, Jim. And over to Reggie. Reggie?
This is, again, a sensitive topic for me. How many people here are addicted to coffee? Diet Coke? You know, it's easy to stigmatize this community with their vulnerabilities, and we need to make sure that we are addressing the root causes of this, which is often housing and affordability. What you choose to do in your own life ultimately is on you as long as you're safe. I think that we need to understand that this is like the paradise rat experiment. I'm a researcher and published a paper on sustainability in Kootenay, Columbia. But the paradise rat experiment is where when you are in a place not getting the stimulations and the supports you need, you end up choosing the drugs that will affect your life. Whereas in a paradise rat, we can make it. If we address these problems, and Mark Carney wants to address these problems, if you visit votereggie.ca, we have an extensive section on this part, because we need to address the root causes. And with Mark Carney standing shoulder to shoulder, I will be with the power brokers addressing this issue.
Thank you, Reggie. Okay, and a new question, and we're going to have Stephen start off. What is your party's platform on the status and support of the CBC, and what will you do to support quality local media? What is your party's platform on the status and support of the CBC, and what will you do to support quality local media?
So the CBC is an essential service to Canadians. It's been operating for, I don't even know how many years, long before my time. It brings news to rural communities that don't always have access to internet and other services. It needs to be protected. Some people on this stage and their parties would like to say that the CBC is a threat to democracy and that it's spreading misinformation, but I just don't believe that. To quote the great author and journalist Nora Ephron, to write a story you need an angle, which means every story has some inherent bias in it. But I think the CBC has always been the pride of Canada and always projected themselves to be a very neutral source of media. My party will protect it at every cost, and we will also protect local media too, by supporting small networks and other newspapers across Canada.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob?
I'll be the other side of that coin. CBC radio, I mean, I worked up north where that's all we had, and I strongly support CBC radio. I do not believe in giving CBC $1 billion of taxpayers' money for their television programming, where they can do exactly the same as CTV, Global, Juno, any of the other TV programs that you can think of. They go and sell themselves, sell advertising, and they support themselves. When we start funding a media outlet through the federal government, all of a sudden it rings to me like you've got a government media. So why would we do that? Let's make everybody the same. That $1 billion, imagine if we could give some of that to some of our local people here and have the local media be able to support themselves. They're struggling. We just heard earlier how many of the local media we've lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
Yeah, that 12-year-old version of me I talked about in my opener remembers driving through the Northwest Territories on the day of the 1983 Conservative Leadership Campaign, and I wasn't a conservative per se, but man, I cared whether or not John Crosby, Joe Clark, or Brian Mulrooney, and I got to listen by driving with my parents, listening to the radio. My point in the anecdote is the radio matters. It reaches places nowhere else is going to reach. I'm all for the radio. The TV, I can't remember the last time I watched CBC TV. You know, Hockey Night in Canada used to be Saturday night at 6, but since then I literally don't think I've turned it on. So I do think it distorts the private media marketplace. And folks who are proponents of the CBC, I hear their arguments, I hear their logic, but I think the second order consequence they forget is how it messes up private media's ability to actually make an income and run a business.
Thank you. And Reggie?
The private media marketplace is predominantly American news, and CBC is so important to our culture. We need to protect local journalism like we have at Eno locally here in the Cranbrook region. We need to address problems that are within the CBC, like bonuses going to the executives when there are cuts happening to the programs. I have 4 children that regularly use CBC Kids. A lot of it is online. Maybe we can discuss the mandate and make it where we can evolve it. For over 2 years, we heard from Pierre Poilievre, bye-bye CBC, cut the funding, and now magically during an election, we're going to keep CBC radio. That does make me question what else we're going to, waver on. We need a hard response right now to go against the United States, and that is not weakening our culture systems like CBC. We need to bring you to the table to discuss how we can move forward with this and use it so our taxpayers' dollars are used most effectively. Remember, of our budget, 0.27% of it is used towards CBC.
Thank you. Kaylee?
A, hands off the CBC. B, let's increase funding to the CBC. It has been starved of investment for decades. We're having this conversation because we're losing viewers on our national network, because it has been forced to compete with competitive channels. And that is not what a national network is for. It is to ensure that those of us in rural communities have our stories told, that we are seen, that we are reflected in the media landscape of this country, that our mission, what's the exact mandate of the CBC, that we are informed as well as just entertained. I'm sure many of us are going to be watching the debates coming up later this week on CBC, and that is how many of us stay informed and engaged citizens. Schitt's Creek, North of North, Hudson and Rex, these shows and CBC Radio, 1,600 people are employed across Canada, and that is an investment well spent in my books.
Thank you, Kaylee. We're going to take a short 10-minute intermission just to give our candidates a break. Again, it's very warm up here under the lights. I think our candidates have done an excellent job. How about a big hand for them? Thank you. Of course, you guys have been great, so we'll allow you to stretch your legs and get some water, and we're going to reconvene back in 10 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to commence with a few more questions that have been submitted by the audience. I'm hoping to get through 5 or 6 more, then we're going to go to closing comments and then wrap things up for the night. We're going to start them off with a easy one, but I think it's kind of intriguing because we have a very large riding for our federal political riding here, and I thought this question's quite fitting. And we are going to start off with, who did I finish off with? Was that Stephen last time starting? So it'll be Rob. What are your ties to the local riding? What are your ties to the local riding? 1 minute.
Okay, I live in Creston. I started off my RCMP career there, and I migrated back. I have a lot of friends there, but unfortunately, my wife has more relatives in Cranbrook, so I will probably end up in Cranbrook. Although I do love a really small town. So my ties, I've worked throughout this riding in not only policing, but of course the last 6 years representing you. I've been to every nick and cranny, every little small town. Been to many, coffee meetings and that. It is a tricky riding, wintertime especially. I mean, we all know what it's like here in the winter. The Selmo Creston isn't the greatest spot to travel over. But I know people. I've lived in Nelson, Creston, Cranbrook, and I've worked throughout the riding. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rob. And Jim?
For the last 11 years, my wife and I have made our home just outside of Nelson. So raised 4 young adults. Our youngest is now 16. Our 3 girls have, for the most part, basically flown the coop. But speaking of coops, then I have 9 chickens, 1 dog, and 2 cats. And in a weird way, with all of my work in the past with interior health, I feel like I know every community in the riding because I've thought about them from a healthcare point of view. And I'm having the privilege of going around this campaign and meeting dozens and dozens and dozens of you, and I'm improving my knowledge of every community by leaps and bounds.
Thank you, Jim. And Reggie?
I am a proud 4th-generation Kootenay resident. I love the territory that the Ktunaxa Nation allows me to call home. I'm so fortunate for all that I have here. For the last 12 years, I have managed a rural economic business out on Kootenay Lake, the Dock and Duck, and many of you here may have seen me. I have been a prominent member within the community. I was born in Cranbrook. I was raised in Wassa, went through the Kimberley school system, graduated in Cranbrook, went to Selkirk College for a professional management diploma, worked out on Kootenay Lake, Nelson, and now have come back to Cranbrook to go to school during COVID, and now I'm working in the social investment sector in our region. I have deep ties here. I have 4 kids. My family, I will be buried here. I love our area, and I will fight for it in every way to make sure that your voice is brought to Ottawa and we can address these problems that we have.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
All right. Well, I grew up in the West Kootenays. Unfortunately, my hometown of Castlegar just got carved out, and it drives me crazy. But my work currently as Executive Director of the Regional Arts Council, my job is to support cultural development all across the Columbia Basin, which is even slightly larger than the geography of this riding. So I'm used to maintaining relationships and partnerships with organizations and individuals in every community of this riding, and I feel very strongly about being out and about and maintaining those relationships as strongly as possible. My husband and I have been based in Nelson for 3 years, and we're going to be in the area for the long haul as well. He was an actor originally, and he's just completing his training to be a registered professional forester. So we're tied to the industry here, and I love my work serving the community all across the region.
Thank you, Kaylee. And Stephen?
I am also, much like Reggie, a 4th-generation Kootenay person. My great-grandfather opened up Fernie's first butcher shop, and my grandfather opened up the first roofing company, or one of the first 2 roofing companies. I am a manager at the local Save-On, and I teach yoga part-time in Fernie as well. My mother is the bylaw officer in Fernie, and I've always been a Fernieite. I was born in Fernie. I actually went to middle school here in Laurie, though, when I was 13 and 14. I'm as valley as it comes, and I don't ever intend to leave this place. This is home for me, and much like Reggie, I intend to be buried here.
Thank you. Okay, on to a new question, and we're going to start off with Jim on this one. How are you going to support and increase funding to the food security network to support the increased needs of our community? I'm going to repeat that. How are you going to support and increase funding to the food security network to support the increased needs of our community?
So In a time when we're dealing with trade issues and wondering about our backyard, it makes perfect sense that we're growing and making and providing for ourselves at a local level. So I sometimes say every MP is one voice, one vote, one advocate. And you use that voice to make sure that people have a spotlight on those providers and those things that need to be focused on so that everyone in the community is aware of what's important. And I actually think that's the number one role in my answer to this question. But to the extent that there may need to be like higher level advocacy and work up chains to get people, whether it be grants or some other kind of infrastructure that they need, then again, that's where the MP just has to go to work and get to bat.
Thank you. And down to Reggie. Reggie?
Our food security network locally is weak. And how we're going to do that is with direct investment from the federal government and programs that Mark Carney is talking about. We are going to bring vertical infrastructure, vertical agriculture into our area to make it where we can grow food indoors for food security. We are going to introduce robots into our agriculture. We are going to be leaders within our country to make it where everyone can have food on the table. I think we need to grow programs like the Liberals' Food in Schools and making it where no matter where your background comes from, when your kid goes to the school, they will have food. Food and not being hungry is directly tied to better outcomes. So there's a lot of things that the federal government can do, and as MP, I'm going to be engaging these conversations and making sure we get direct investment to modernize how we're doing agriculture and supporting the farmers markets and all the people that are there so we can have food security all throughout our region, individually and growing
Reggie.
it.
Kaylee?
I love this question. As Jim mentioned, food sovereignty is so important right now, and especially to those of us here in the Kootenays and as we're experiencing forest fires and other extreme weather events, bolstering our food networks are so important. Working in the nonprofit sector, I know how challenging it is to maintain robust support networks. I can imagine what this network is struggling with, a lack of core funding, project to project-based funding that simply doesn't allow them to build capacity and innovate for the future. So absolutely, I'm very supportive of increasing funding there.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen?
I honestly was disappointed when the Food in Schools program did not pass. That was something that I think a lot of children could have benefited from. But in this valley, to promote our own food security, we need to defend our local farmers. Factory farming is not a sustainable or healthy thing to do, and we need to really give our local farmers more opportunity to make it to our markets. So we need to make it easier for our local farmers to enter our markets. We need to strengthen family farms. We need to reduce food waste as well. Canada is a small country, but we, for some reason, create a ton of food waste. We need to be more choosy and more recyclable about our food waste. Sorry.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. And last on the subject, Rob?
Yeah, we realized during COVID how fragile our food security was because we had a hard time. We were at the end of the line and we didn't get a lot of food. Our shelves were fairly empty. But there's many things we could do. And one is we realized then that why don't we have college teaching basic how to plant and how to grow vegetables, and we lost that art. I was in Nelson at the food bank in Nelson, and they actually have a program where they grow their own vegetables out on little planters outside the food banks in the United Church there, and they grow their planters and they're training people how to grow it. That's one thing we need to do is try and get the interest up for our younger people in how to grow their own. The other thing is, of course, for our farmers, take the carbon tax off. The carbon tax was just killing them for costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And moving on to a question, and Reggie will be our start on that one. There is talk about increasing pipelines across Canada. What is your view on that? There is talk about increasing pipelines across Canada. What is your view on that?
Bill C-69 does not limit building pipelines across Canada. What it does is it makes sure that the federal government has a mechanism to address the government and the rights holders across our nation. It is interesting, under the Harper years, there was no pipelines that were built. Under Justin Trudeau, we got pipelines to a port and making it where we're shipping it across the world. We do need to look into this and bring the key stakeholders and the rights holders to the table to make it. We cannot do this without lowering the interprovincial trade barriers. We need to make it where we have access and can work with provinces like Quebec and understand their problems so we can grow this across our country. I am supportive of pipelines, but they do need to have the environment number one and the rights holders. And there's different ways, like having catches underneath, like in a commercial kitchen, the grease goes in, so the spills in our watersheds are as minimized as possible.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
I'd like to emphasize first and foremost that if any pipeline project goes ahead from east to west, that it is grounded in free and informed consent of Indigenous peoples all along that route. This is a politically risky proposal. We know Quebec is deeply opposed to any pipelines going across their territory. So it's an interesting conversation to be having. It's politically fraught for sure. The NDP is deeply supportive of an east-west energy corridor focused on renewable energy and stitching together renewable projects across the country. That also provides proof of concept as we seek to scale up those solutions. What I rarely see is the full costing of pipeline projects that take into account as well the additional cost of dealing with the added carbon that's going into the atmosphere of those projects. So when there's a strong environmental case, I am willing to support those projects, but at the same time, we need a full accounting, and sometimes the math just doesn't add up.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen?
So as a Green, I'm sure you're all going to expect me to say there's going to be no pipelines across Canada anymore, and we're going to go completely green, and that is what we are proposing. It's interesting to me to hear other people say that we're going to put pipelines in every direction. If every direction is going to a Texas refinery where we make less back on our product, I don't think that's benefiting Canadians, and I just think that's going to create more emissions and more land issues along the way. We do need informed consent from Indigenous communities before we put anything through. Ms. Lind was completely right on that. But we do need to put Canada first. If we're going to be sending our products abroad for refining and then sold on the market to get a fraction of it back, that's not a good deal for us.
Thanks, Stephen. Rob?
Yeah, we will repeal C-69. We will build a pipeline east-west. We'll follow a process. We've got a 1 year and done. We'll have 1 year to have an approval to have that pipeline. We're not taking 18 years to get a mining permit, like that's been the history of this. We'll get the work done. And we talked earlier about, well, why would we do that? Well, look at our debt. We need to do something. If we can get natural gas, for example, out of our country and replace coal, thermal coal, like why wouldn't we? We need to be more progressive. We need to be independent of the United States. We do not need to be bullied around with tariffs, and we need to move forward with pipelines in our own country. Let's be one. Let's be Canada. Let's be proud of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
Yeah, I think the core of this answer drills down to like a Trump protection plan, that if we're going to have the hypocrisy where Western Canada transmits by a pipeline heavy oil to refineries in the U.S. Gulf Coast, while at the same time Atlantic Canada or Quebec is bringing in shipments from Venezuela or the Middle East so that they can use their refineries, that doesn't make sense. So at least in the short term, because my long-term ambition would be that we don't have to work in these neighborhoods and rely on fossil fuels in the way, but at least in the short term, sell our supply to us and transmit it in a safe and effective way. It's just simple.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, a new question starting with Kaylee. Tell us your stand on diversity and inclusion. Tell us your stand on diversity and inclusion.
I'm very supportive of diversity and inclusion. That's an interesting way to frame that question. Actually, part of what I do, in my work is supporting organizations within the cultural space in this region as they look to more thoroughly integrate those commitments into the work that they're doing, from the policy level to human resources to community outreach. That's something that's really challenging. How do organizations reach out to communities that have been marginalized, who may not have a lot of trust in standard institutions and nonprofits and governments, build that trust, and how do you approach relationships in a really reciprocal way? I'm really grateful that a lot of people are working hard on answering those questions, providing resources to those who are navigating those questions, and I'm really grateful that I'm within a professional community where we are actively trying to be better stewards of marginalized communities in Canada. Stewards is the wrong word, partners and supporters in the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen, tell us your stand on diversity and inclusion.
Well, I mean, much like Kaylee said, I'm very much for it. I think we're all for it. Some of us would say that Canada is a mosaic, and that is true, we are. My party has been at the forefront of putting people from marginalized groups first. We had a leader who was the first Jewish and Black woman to lead a federal party. We had an interim leader who was the first trans person to lead a federal party in Canada. I think everybody is equal, and in order for us to actually achieve full inclusion, we need to put our bias aside and properly view everybody as our equals.
Thank you. Rob?
I'm fortunate enough to have 35 years in the RCMP, and of course they were very diverse and very inclusive, and they still are. I think one thing that we hit the nail on the head, everybody should be treated equally. I've said this earlier. Everyone needs to be treated the same. I think we have a long way to go in recognizing different people have different challenges, but I also believe as well in the key roles where people can shine, and it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody from Harvard. It could be somebody from a community that doesn't have that education that would be more fitting. So I do think that in some agencies the federal government has stepped up to the plate, but in many others they have not.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
Well, sometimes the best way to answer a question is just by telling a story or an anecdote. So the year I entered medical school is 1994, and it was the first year that the University of Alberta entered, or admitted, if you will, more female medical students than males. And basically the track record in medicine has stayed on that consistent path where now it's approximately 2/3 of the medical students are females. But I say that as background context because in my time as 5 years of chief of staff at the Kootenay Lake Hospital in Nelson, it became very apparent to us, and people pointed out, that we didn't have any females in medical leadership. And so, we actively recruited amongst my female colleagues to make sure that those folks were represented as department heads and the like. And it's a very tiny anecdote in a huge, huge topic, but it points out that we care and that I want to take practical action.
Thank you. And Reggie.
Jim, thank you so much for bringing up women. We can see inclusion right here on this table where we have 4 males and 1 female. This is the type of inclusion that we need to address. I wanted to run to become your politician 7 years ago and understood that stepping aside for a woman so I can learn and grow is important. But that's not to omit our 2S LGBTQ plus community that feels threatened coming from small individuals with a loud voice, having say Facebook take away rules that they have to make it where they're exposed more to threats and dangers to them and their community, having parades. But we can't also forget immigration and how important that is to grow what we are in Canada. We are all, excluding the Indigenous, we are all immigrants to this land, and we need to have diversity, inclusion, equity, women's rights. These are all important issues that I will stand for as your member of parliament.
Thank you. And we're going to start Stephen off with our new question. Gender-based violence. Will your party implement a national action plan on gender-based violence? And if so, what will it contain? Will it contain a commitment to long-term funding for shelters and crisis services? And I'll repeat that one more time. Gender-based violence. Will your party implement a national action plan on gender-based violence? And if so, what will it contain? Will it contain a commitment to long-term funding for shelters and crisis services? Stephen?
So my party does have two leaders. One of them is still Elizabeth May, the only female leading a federal party right now. Though we have not properly discussed that in our policy or in our platform, I do believe wholeheartedly that we would unanimously support that. Protecting women in this country is, I think, of urgent concern to all of us, I would hope. There needs to be stronger laws when it comes to protecting women, unfortunately, and other people as well. So we definitely need to have more reform on our law enforcement and the way we phrase laws. Sorry, I don't have more to speak on that.
Thanks, Stephen. Rob?
We've come out with some new policy that we're going to be very strict with gender violence and really start to not only enforce it but to train, like the RCMP, for example, train them so they're more aware of what's happening out there. We've got women's shelters where we've had to move women from, like in our area, Nelson to Selmo, and where they're still being threatened by the abuser, and we have to put a stop to that. And I'm all about supporting, and hopefully we can do a lot more, like to have a deterrence to that kind of behavior. It's just awful. It's unacceptable. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
Yeah, when I think about this topic, I think about two key points. And I think any community of size, and I'd be open for some arbitrary definitions, but it seems to me any community of size, say 2,000-3,000 or above, needs to have a safe house, a shelter, a mechanism for people to escape from this kind of thing. And then the second point is that ultimately, while there is the social support side of this, there is the policing side of it. And somehow I think, not being a police person myself, but there must be some ways we can unravel that. And I think I'd have to really ask the community writ large what the best mechanisms for that would be. That I don't profess to have deep experience on that, and I simply need to go to the community and say, please, let's work together, teach me what we need to do.
Thank you. And over to Reggie.
Gender-based violence is something serious that we need to have the discussion on. I may not have the direct answer for what this is, but I'm going to be doing a lot of research to make sure I understand this question a lot better. My first thoughts are the different housing that we have, safe housing for women, 2S, LGBTQ plus community, immigrants, or anyone who is subjected to gender-based violence. We need to make sure that we understand what they went through, we reconcile and talk about the truths that have happened to make it where we can understand how to address this problem most proactively. This goes by engaging these conversations. Your member of parliament should be directly going to these houses, to these individuals, asking them appropriately and not too aggressively to make sure that we understand how the government can best protect this. I do know Mark Carney has plans for this, and I hope to talk more about this in the future.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
Gender parity is very important to the NDP internally and within our riding associations. So I can say absolutely a national action plan for gender-based violence would be in line with the priorities of our party. Frankly, I think we've taken a step back in the current cabinet. We don't have, for the first time in decades, a specific ministry that explicitly names women and gender equality. The NDP and I know other organizations across the country were very alarmed by that omission. And we can't talk about this question without talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is a constant battle within law enforcement, within our governments, to ensure that those women and their lives are taken seriously. We have countless cases recently in the headlines in terms of remains being treated with respect and searched for, and we need to continue advocating on behalf of those Indigenous communities. Okay,
Thanks, Kaylee. Okay, and on to a new question, and Rob will be our first answer. This is regarding tariffs, recession, worries about the economy. What will you or your party do so that Canada does not lose its competitive edge and risk business investments fleeing to the U.S.? What will you or your party do so that Canada does not lose its competitive edge and risk business investment fleeing to the U.S.?
Yeah, and we certainly had a rude awakening, didn't we, with the tariffs from the U.S. But I do believe right now, at this point, we don't have a government. We need to implement reciprocal tariffs to discourage the American tariffs and the American attacks. We need to keep Canadian working funds. So we're going to have a fund that if your business has been directly targeted and you cannot do your trade that you've been used to, that we will support you with some funding. Because if we don't do that, then we're losing more small businesses. I believe we need to accelerate the CUSMA, which is a Canadian-U.S.-Mexico agreement. It's due next year. I think we need to open that up and see where we're going to go. Now, can we trust them down there? That's a pretty good question, but I think we need to do it. We need to stand on our sovereignty. We need to protect ourselves. We have to start looking at trades with other areas, and that means going into Europe, going over to Asia. We never did that. So I think we just need to take care of ourselves and treat them.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
The amazing thing about this forum is you get so many questions, and one of the tough things is you get 1 minute for a 30-minute answer. But so I'm gonna take this slightly creative approach and say 2 words: mutual recognition. So what do I mean? There is a way to open up interprovincial trade and smash all our trade barriers in this country, and it goes forcing legislation that all of the different impediments and laws and legislations that have put up, so you can't sell BC wine in XYZ province and all these other ways it goes back and forth, is by just saying mutual recognition. Every other province will acknowledge that BC has certain guidelines, but the other provinces will mutually recognize those, and then it goes both ways, and we blow away all of the Canadian barriers. We start selling amongst ourselves and carry on economically.
Thank you, Jim. Reggie?
Mark Carney has a plan by June 1st for exactly what Jim is speaking, and that's going to be implemented nationally to take down the interprovincial barriers by July 1st. So good points, Jim. Mark Carney is on that, and on that quick. U.S. rhetoric and tariffs represent a real threat to Canada's economy and our sovereignty, and while some may advocate for a softer response, we must stand firm defending our interests. We will protect our sovereignty. We will diversify trade. We are going to modernize our defense. We're going to have fair trade for Canadian workers and unite behind strength. What we're going to do is focus on our largest trading market, which is not the United States of America. We are going to grow that within Canada and do it quickly. We're going to have your voice at the table. I am going to lead you as MP, standing with the power brokers at the governing table, being loud and making sure direct investment is happening here in Cranbrook and our Columbia-Kootenay region.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
We are committed to a buy Canadian, build Canadian, buy Canadian plan that is supporting ambitious infrastructure projects here in our communities and focusing on leveraging Canadian-made materials in those projects, Canadian steel, Canadian lumber, keeping as much of that activity and that revenue here in the country as possible. We're also committed to matching dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs into supports for affected industries. So every dollar generated from retaliatory tariffs, that's hard to say at this time of day, will be invested back into affected industries. And we know small business is the backbone of the Canadian economy. We need robust supports for small business. A very pragmatic thing is putting caps on merchant credit card fees at 1%.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen?
I'm loving the sense of nationalism on the stage today. It makes me feel proud to be Canadian again. Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary asked the public not to give retaliatory tariffs to the United States. And that was completely delusional. We're not going to bend over and take it. We absolutely need to defend ourselves. The previous Conservative leader proposed Kanzuk, and I think that is another thing that we need to entertain again, or other forms of trade agreements with other small nations who have similar interests. The independent, Dr. Jim down there, he was right about the interprovincial trade. That was a very astute point. Thank you for bringing it up. I definitely believe that in order to protect our interests, we need to diversify our trade with other people, whether it's Japan, New Zealand, or whatever, or even open up Kanzuk once more.
Thank you, Stephen. And the next question, a new question, we'll start off with Jim. What is your plan to support local arts and artists? What is your plan to support local arts and artists? Last question, thank you.
Hey, I think there's probably a fork in the road on how this question's going to get answered, so let's see if I can foreshadow. One will be, well, we have to do tons and tons of government this and that, and I'm for that. We have some government programs that help create a backstop or a feasibility option for our arts right now. Carry on. But the actual answer is be a patron of the arts yourself. I have a daughter who did dance and went on for professional dance. Man, was I there all the time. I had other daughters in theater and music, and my son is geared a little bit more to the sports side of scenes. Get out there, do it, buy a ticket. Go be a part of it, be a part of your community. Yes, there's a role for government, we'll keep it, I'm not messing with that, but get out and do it yourself.
Thank you, Jim. And Reggie?
Our Canadian government is spending tens of billions of dollars in grants, and a lot of that goes towards arts and culture. We talked about CBC earlier, but the issue we have is a lot of challenges in grant writing and how to receive it. We need to lower the barriers, make a better understanding, and make it where people in this room and our communities know how to access these grants. I propose a central portal for our whole riding where not only will there be a frequently asked questions around grants, but how to apply for them, the challenges in doing it. We have AI technology that we can implement in here so you can talk about your situation and make it where you apply for the grants that are specific. While we can talk about growing more within the government, we need to make sure what the government is doing is more accessible. And how we do that is through a centralized portal where grants, direct infrastructure, and what the government is doing is heard by the people, you.
Thank you, Reggie. Kaylee?
Well, coming off the conversation about tariffs and the need for greater Canadian identity, this is the time to invest in Canadian-made arts and culture. Our sector is a huge economic generator, so those dollars duplicate and they increase huge tourism dollars and indirect and direct benefits in our community. The Canada Coalition for the Arts has been advocating for many years to increase the total Canada Council budget to $740 million. It has been frozen. The BC Arts Council has been frozen. Artists and organizations in this sector have been doing more with less for decades. And so it's absolutely beyond time to notch up that support. We have so many benefits to communities. We increase well-being, health. Those involved with the arts continue to outperform in all sorts of social measures. And we need to support the sector and give it what it's due.
Thank you, Kaylee. Stephen?
My grandmother is an artist in Fernie who's been struggling to get her art into local shops and venues due to the local Fernie Arts Commons. We need to remove restrictions like that and allow our Canadian artists to really thrive. We need to promote Indigenous artists and Canadian artists on the global stage because we really do have some fantastically talented people in this valley and in this country. We need to invest in Canadian productions and Canadian film and television more. And we also need to support small businesses because ultimately that's where artists go. They are small businesses. They're selling their work, they're selling their art, and they're selling their ideas. They are a business by themselves, and we need to support them.
Thank you. And Rob?
Thank you. Yeah, our arts and culture are just so important. I mean, I'm so proud to be Canadian, and we need to be proud of our culture and our arts. We do supply the grants. I'm just thinking to myself, I was talking to a fellow today from Cranbrook about how can we get a little more money into the arts area, and how about bureaucracy that we have in Ottawa that is, we've hired 100,000 new bureaucrats. How about we start trimming that and start actually getting down to the where the boots hit the ground and the rubber hits the road, and start actually giving some more money, more funding for the arts and culture area. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So that concludes our questions from the audience. Thank you guys very much for all your questions submitted. We did get through the majority of them. There are 3 questions that we couldn't quite get to, but I think actually just seeing them that we've actually somewhat already discussed it with some of our questions today. We're now going to move to closing statements, and we just remind each candidate that they will have 2 minutes to speak. And as candidates, you can speak on any topic that you choose. Oh, my script says 4. 4 minutes, yeah. Okay, 4 minutes, 2 minutes. No, it says 2. Okay, 4 minutes, sorry. Not a worry, should have read it. Each candidate will be given 4 minutes to speak on any subject that they choose. You can choose to rebut any of the other questions or answers that you heard. You can just do your closing comments. At this time, we started in the beginning, in the introductions from my left. We're going to start on the far left now, and we're going to start off with Jim with his closing comments.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out and engaging in a core part of our democracy. Your very presence shows that you want to be a part of the process, perhaps express support, and then hopefully learn more. And so along the way tonight, I hope I've earned your trust a little bit. You're getting more contact time with me, and you've heard some of my answers. But there's a point that I want to really emphasize, and that is that as much as I'm happy to answer all the questions, that's cool, I talk about my pillars, my primary ideas, as being good conversation starters. Because my core idea is to bring the representative back to representative democracy. And so I said that I hope I've earned your trust a little bit. And we talked about CBC radio. If you're up for it, here's a little exercise we could do. You could close your eyes, I could be on the radio, and I could tell you a story about how I see our political scene right now. Let's do it in a minute and a half, see how this goes. So imagine you're at the bus stop with your kid or maybe your grandkid. It's 10 years ago. You're excited, it's the first day of school. The bus rolls up. The bus isn't yellow, it's red. And the driver, boy, he's a sunshiny guy. And he always wants to talk about his socks and his Facebook videos. And just for the sake of it, let's call him Justin. Okay, over the years, you enjoy talking with the guy. He's good at the bus stop. But you start to realize that the bus doesn't get maintained. That, man, you're always hearing the brakes. The windshield wipers, they're trash. And the tires are balded. And you're starting to worry. You're like, is this a good thing? Do I keep bringing my grandkid to the bus? Is that all right? Is this safe? And you've come to the conclusion that no, it's not. So then, you show up and they got a new bus driver. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's got a few more gray hairs. Seems okay. But bus is the same. Nothing's changed. Man, he's got a game, and you've heard of some reputation, but nothing's changed. And you poke around and you think about it, and sometimes on that same red bus, you see somebody in an orange suit, and you're not sure what they're doing. They seem to be like supporting the bus driver a little bit, but you're never quite clear like what they're actually achieving or getting at. And so you're like, well, I got to do something different. But then you stop and you think to yourself, wow, am I going to put my kid on that blue bus? I don't know about that blue bus. Where's the blue bus going? What's the blue bus driver all about? Can I trust that? So I got a different concept for you. What if you had a community shuttle that was driven by somebody from your neighborhood that you knew, that you could talk with all the time, that you could always engage, that was actually your local contact, didn't have to talk to bus headquarters, wasn't always taking directions from far, far away? but that you actually then organically, on the local level, decided how that bus was going to get maintained, what that driver was going to do, how they were going to go, and where they were going to get your kid, your things that you care about, to and from. And so it's a word picture. I just want us to think that we don't all have to be told how to think from some faraway headquarters by some driver that hasn't shown any idea about maintaining what really needs to be maintained, has a 10-year track record that's trash, and
Thank you,
the
Jim.
new guy hasn't fixed anything.
Thank you. Rob?
Thanks very much. And I've talked to thousands of people in the last 3 weeks, and the number one issue, without question, is inflation. It's the cost of living. Number one, by far. Everything else is off and aside. The tariff issue definitely is very important, but it's the cost of living. Inflation's at an all-time high. Go to Save On Foods, we all do. If I go to Save On Foods in Creston, I can't get out of there. Because people are saying, what are you doing? What's going on with the prices of groceries? And I'm thinking, well, when you have a government that spends what they have been, the only thing that can happen is inflation. Because if you spend more money than you have, everything's going to be more expensive. It's like your credit card. You can't just keep spending money. Our food banks, I mean, I go to the food banks, Cranbrook, and I definitely go to the one in Nelson, and I've been up to the ones in Revelstoke and Golden. Of course, they're not in our riding now, but they were. There's lineups there I've never seen, and the people are just so dedicated. The one in Cranbrook, I don't know if you've been there, but it is amazing what they have done in Cranbrook at the food bank and the donations they get. But there's people lined up at the food bank that used to donate, and they're there with their families. And I'm thinking to myself, how did we get here? You know, housing costs double. Housing costs are double. People who are children, I mean, I've got 5 children. The thought of owning a house is like, it's just not going to happen. Just not. It can't do it unless I give them mine, and I don't want them back at home quite yet. But rent, same. Like you talk housing, people are worried, crap, I can't even rent, let alone buy, and they can't afford to rent. Even behind our office in here where we've got our campaign officers, people sleeping in their cars behind the office. I thought, whoa, boy. But, you know, you get into deficit spending, $62 billion. That means that's more than actually what we're taking in. $1.3 trillion debt, that's interest of, I'd say it's high as $60 billion. That means the first $60 billion the government takes in taxes, you just flushed it because you don't have it. And imagine if you could put that $60 billion into healthcare. We talked a lot about healthcare, maybe because Jim's here. We talk a lot about healthcare. And right, we need way more money, but not on interest. It's been 10 years. This government's had 10 years to do something. And where are we today? Have you never had it so good? Have you heard that statement? You've never had it so good? Come on. We need a change, and we need a change at this election. The Conservative Party will stand up on our voting record. We'll approve major projects because we need these major projects to be able to move forward to pay the debt. And maybe I didn't explain myself well earlier, but if we have the Fording River expansion and if we get into our energy sectors and start selling ourselves and start making some money, hiring people, because when you hire people, they pay taxes. Taxes pay the debt. And we can't have people sitting around and say, well, let's just not do that. Let's not. Why would we want to have any more steel coal, which should be a critical mineral, our highest grade coal in the world? Why shouldn't we be selling that to make steel that we need so we can pay the debt, so we can get people away from the food bank? We need to be proud to be Canadian. Like, we did lose our way, but let's put Canada first. I think we all said that here. I'm proud to be a Canadian, and I hope everyone in here is proud to be Canadian. Let's just pay some bills and be really proud. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Stephen?
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for showing up, and thank you to everyone on stage here for being respectful to the ideas of other people. It really shows the kind of leadership that the people of this community are going to choose from, and it's good choices every way we look. Some of us are going to promise a lot of things, but in actuality, we're only going to have an opportunity to deliver maybe one thing in 4 years as one MP. I've been knocking on doors, talking to Canadians about electoral reform for 10 years across Alberta. That was a promise that the Liberal government made to us over 10 years ago in 2015, and then they pulled out all of a sudden for no reason. If elected, I will fight tirelessly and nonstop to deliver that promise, because we deserve that promise. We don't need politicians who break promises. I'm ready and willing to work with Conservatives, New Democrats, and Liberals to achieve that. I think there is consensus. I think the people crave more power in the ballot. And I hope that when you go to the voting booth or to the polls on that day, you choose wisely about the people you're sending there. Are they going to reflect you, or are they going to be under the thumb of Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney or someone else? You need an MP who's subject to you and you alone, and frankly, I think there's only one option for that, and that's the Green Party. We don't have party whipping. We've always put democracy first. We're not afraid to lose votes by a ranked ballot system or proportional representation. We just want to put Canadians first and Canadian communities first, and I'm encouraging you to vote Green this time. That's where real change lives, and it's breaking a cycle and trying something new.
Thank you, Stephen. Kaylee?
Excellent. Thanks for raising proportional representation, Stephen. I will second my commitment to that system. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to everyone sitting at this table here. I'll just close by saying I am proud to be from the Kootenays. I love this place, but I will admit that as my career was taking off in other places of the country, I didn't think that I would be here building my life so soon. Something happened in 2021. It was a really tough year for forest fires. There was one particular forest fire that was coming down from Nancy Green towards Castlegar and towards my family home where my grandma still lived. It was hard for me to access timely information about evacuations or where the fire was spreading. And I just remember going about my day in Eastern Canada at the time, going to work, coming home, looking around, and thinking, my home is on fire, and no one seems to notice or be bothered by that. That was a really painful time to be so far away. So when the opportunity arose to come to Nelson, to settle in Nelson, it was a pretty easy opportunity for my husband and I to do that. We weren't just leaving the city we were in at the time, we were coming for the strengths of this place, strengths that are unique across the entire country. And I think this is the time for the Kootenays to demonstrate leadership nationally. We love our co-ops, we love our food sovereignty. We have so many strengths here in this place that we need to be spreading and sharing with the country at large. As I go door to door, I'm chatting about the systems and institutions that we take so much pride in. While Canadians at large are focused on buying domestic products, Kootenay folks are looking at our food producers, our manufacturers, our small businesses and service providers right in our own backyard. This is a unique place with a unique political history to match. I'm proud of this region's deep support of the NDP, a legacy that includes Tommy Douglas and universal health care, you see where I'm going with that, as well as dental care and pharmacare, the single greatest expansion to that system in generations. And our local history is just as impressive. Provincial and federal NDPers have simultaneously stood up for the rights of workers, communities, and individuals. Corky Evans demanded compensation for communities that lived along the Columbia River and created the Columbia Basin Trust. Wayne Stetsky and Alex Edemanenko were not afraid to vote in line with their constituents, even if it meant breaking with party line. These are activists, politicians, and this is the legacy that I aspire to be a part of. Representatives who make good trouble in Ottawa, in Cranbrook, Kimberley, Invermere, Trail, Creston, and everywhere across this riding. I'm hearing from voters that they want political leaders and representatives with a spine and the courage to stand up for workers' rights and against wealthy corporations. What does standing up for workers really look like? Well, it looks like the successful passing of anti-scab legislation, The NDP successfully banned the use of scab workers in federally regulated industries, and we're seeing this impact the current negotiations of Rogers technicians right here in the Kootenays. It's also standing firm and demanding that workers are at the front of the line when companies fail. I heard today about a local 405 member who gave 40 years of his life to a mill in Galloway. That mill is closing now, and he's worried he will not receive severance and won't have anything to leave behind for his family. This is unacceptable, and we need NDP MPs at the table in Ottawa to stand up and say so. The NDP will always put you first, and I'm committed to putting Kootenay residents first. I believe in responsive government. I currently serve the entire Columbia Basin in my work, so I know how critical it is to be in community in all of our communities to learn and to fight for real solutions.
Thank you, Kaylee. Reggie?
Canada strong means Kootenay strong. We need to stand up to Trump. We need to stand up for affordability. We need to stand up for healthcare, housing. We need to stand up for the Kootenays. Now, you've heard me speak about Donald Trump and the tariffs and everything that's coming. That is the biggest issue we have on the ballot. We have two people ultimately here that we're voting for today. We are voting for Pierre Poilievre, or we are voting for Mark Carney. Mark Carney is in the lead, and with the polling, even we are confident it is going to be a Mark Carney government. I would love to stand with Mark Carney, with you and your voice at the table. And the vote splitting here is very real. The Conservative concern is 1 in 5 Conservative voters believe Canada should be annexed with the United States. The Progressive concern is the Liberals are polling at 28% this morning, according to 338canada.ca, and rising. Our membership is swelling by the thousands every week. We are getting new volunteers and new signups. There is a movement happening right now in Columbia, Kootenay, Southern Rockies. The NDP I agree with much of what Kaylee Lind has said here today. I agree with much of what our Green Party has said, or our Independent. And I think that we need to band together like never before and vote boldly. It is so important this election that we do not let a career politician go and negotiate with Trump. The Mark Carney Liberals are not the Trudeau Liberals. We are understanding that under Trudeau, things may have gone too far, or they did not go far enough. So I have an ask to all of our progressive voters here today, that it's important that we understand that we vote boldly. The progressive vote is frustrated. We have lost 2 elections in a row. We are not at the table talking about what needs to happen. I appreciate Rob Morrison and his service to our country through being an MP and through being an RCMP. However, I come with higher energy, with greater understanding and better unity connecting the different factions within our group. We are not a broken Canada. We are a united Canada. Where we need improvements is communication. And you've heard me speak of the centralized portal that I'm going to champion, but I'm not going to stop there. You are going to have a weekly newsletter from my office understanding every action I have done that week. I am going to be making it where there is open office hours, so if you want to talk to me directly as your MP, you have the ability to do that. You send an email to your MP's office. Many of you have told me that there has been no response. I respect the office and what they've done as MP, but I know that they can do better. And under my leadership with Mark Carney, I am going to bring that directly into Columbia, Kootenay, Southern Rockies, and we are going to help our seniors. We have a lot of plans around government spending to cut waste and modernize, to open data and accountability, rural-proof funding. We're going to be addressing roads and transportation. We are going to grow the Waneta Corridor out in Trail and make it where our resources and products can come into our area and go to market faster. We don't need to sit down with these people, as we've talked about tonight. We need to stand up and realize that we need a strong voice here in Columbia Kootenay, and I want to represent all of you. I have worked my whole life trying to understand how to do this job better, be passionate. I have tried and wanted to be on this stage, and here I am. And I want to stand up for every young person who wants to be involved and get your voice into government. Nobody here on this table will work as hard as I will, and I implore all of our candidates and everyone who's a progressive to understand that this is an important election, and we must vote boldly for Mark Carney through Reggie Goldsbury. VoteReggie.ca. Thank you,
Reggie. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big hand for our candidates? We've put them on 2.5 hours of grilling. And of course, the crowd deserves a great applause. You've been very respectful and very engaged for the last 2.5 hours. We're going to wrap things up. Just a few thank yous. We'd like to, of course, thank our candidates. City of Cranbrook for providing the facility for us. Of course, our volunteers and the Key City Theatre for hosting us. I said earlier, this will be replayed on Artistic Media Productions' YouTube page, which will also be linked to the JCI Kootenay Facebook page. So I think you just have to type in JCI Kootenay to your Facebook, or your friends can watch this televised. Please remember to go vote, and please check out the Elections Canada website for the times and places that you can vote. The JCI has this handout at the front. If you haven't grabbed one already, it shows you all the advanced voting times and days there. I'm Jason Wheeldon. It's been pleasurable hosting this. It's really been an absolute pleasure meeting each of our 5 candidates running for this federal election. Thank you for being so gracious, and how about another applause for them? Before I close off, I'm just going to ask a couple of our volunteers from the JCI to come up and say a few words.
Wow, you had the mic very high. Oh my goodness. I just want to thank you on behalf of JCI Kootenay for coming out and supporting this event. We put a lot of hours into planning it and volunteering at it every time there's a new election. So thank you so much. And I want to specifically thank, obviously, the candidates for coming out, taking the time to speak with all of us and sharing your views so that we can also put it online. So thank you so much, everybody.
And one last person we would like to thank would be our lovely moderator, Jason Wheeldon. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
All right, you guys are off the hot.